So you learn how to fetch data with Axios. Now, as a front-end developer, it's important that you understand what happens under the hood when you call the get method. And that's what we're going to talk about in this lesson. So when we call the get method, Axios sends an HTTP request to the server. HTTP is short for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. I know, it's a mouthful, but basically it's a protocol for transferring data over the internet. It's the same protocol that powers the web. So when we visit a website, our browser sends an HTTP request to the website server asking for some content. The server then responds with an HTTP response, which contains some HTML, CSS, and other resources needed to display the website in our browser. Now let's see an HTTP request in action. So back to the browser. Here in DevTools, let's go to the Network tab. So here we have a bunch of requests. Some of them are for JavaScript files. We are not interested in all of them. We are only interested in the requests sent by Axios. So let's filter by fetch/XHR, which is short for XML HTTP request. So here we have two requests to the user's endpoint. And once again, the reason we have two requests is because of the strict mode. Now let me take this window out so you can see things clearly. All right, so here we have a request to the user's endpoint. The status of the request is 200, which means successful. The size of this request is 600 bytes. And on my machine, this request took 64 milliseconds to complete. Now, if you click on this request, we can see more details. So here in the headers tab, we have some general headers. So in HTTP, every request and every response has two sections. The headers, where we specify metadata, and the body, where we supply or get the data. So here in the headers tab, we have some general headers like request URL. This is our endpoint. We have the request method, which is set to get, that is used for fetching data. Later in this section, we'll work with other request methods for creating, updating, and deleting data. Once again, we see the status code, which is 200. We have remote address, which is set to the IP address of the target web server. We also have response headers. These are the headers included in the response. For the most part, you don't have to worry about them. Now let's look at some of the request headers. Here we have a bunch of headers. Again, for the most part, you don't have to worry about them. When needed, we'll come back and talk about specific headers. Now on the preview tab, we can see the data returned from the server properly formatted. So these are our user objects. In the response tab, we see the body of the response sent from the server in plain text. So here we have an array of JavaScript objects. So this was an HTTP request in action.